Yo, what is up guys? It is Bumfris, back with another episode of Entitled Parents. Today's episode is an absolute banger and I know you're gonna love this one. Let's aim for 12 likes on today's video. I know it's extreme, but I think we can do it. If you're new, make sure to subscribe for daily videos. Then once you've liked the video, all you need to do is sit back, relax, and get annoyed at some entitled parents. I found this sub and man, do my parents ever fit into the entitled parent category? I have a few stories about them, but this is the one that I think most illustrates their entitlement. But first, some background. My hubby and I got married in my last year of college. I was focusing on finishing my degree and thus was only working part-time. He had a full-time job, but 6 months into our marriage, he was laid off. He had trouble finding a new job, and even though I found work relatively quickly after graduating, we still didn't make enough money to afford a house until about 4 years later. We lived with his parents for those 4 years. This story is from just after we bought our first house 4 years into marriage. Now onto the story. My hubby and I had bought a small condo and were settled in. We both had steady jobs and finally seemed to be on our own. A month or so after buying the house, I got a text from my mother. She informed me that now my hubby and I were on solid financial footing, we needed to start paying them back all the money that I owed them. I asked what money, rightly confused because at most they contributed $500 to the wedding and there had been no mention of any money being owed, which is when she told me that I was expected to repay them the monetary value for all of the clothes, toys, items and gifts that they'd gotten me that I hadn't used to their satisfaction, as well as for all of the taxes that they'd paid for me. This was for my entire life. So anything that I hadn't used enough, I supposedly owed them money for. My parents had always had money issues, and I'd realized much later that this was one of the ways that they'd attempt to shake down all of their children for funds. I didn't respond immediately and instead talked to a wise friend. Eventually, I asked my mother to provide an itemized list of what I supposedly owed them, being sure to deduct for anything that they had sold or kept for personal use or given away to others. I never got a reply to that request and the subject was quickly dropped, but it apparently made them draw up contracts that they forced my two younger brothers to sign, promising to repay them for various expenses. This happened almost a decade ago at this point. All of us were legally adults, but both of my brothers still lived at home, thus giving my parents more power over them than me at the time. I doubt that the contracts were in any way legally enforceable, but there was no way for my brothers to know that at the time. Unfortunately, it meant that my parents wound up stealing a decent amount of money from both of my brothers. Most from my youngest brother, who was stuck living with them until early 2020 till we got him out. In early 2020, after another entitled parent event, we all went no contact with them. You know, it's one thing to come across an entitled parent in the wild, where you come across them at GameStop or a Walmart or something like that, but for your own parents to be an entitled parent, especially to the point where they demand that you pay them for having raised you essentially, that's something that I can't imagine having to deal with on a daily basis, and I'm not surprised in any way that all of the kids have gone no contact with the parents. It sounds like in their adult lives, they're better off without having their parents around manipulating them and trying to extort them for money. These are the types of people when it comes to entitled parent stories that I truly feel sorry for. I cancelled my dream wedding and did a small one instead, as during Christmas I was bombarded by my mum and her family saying that they would not attend my wedding if I invited my biological dad. I also have a stepdad, which is the only one on that side who actually seemed to understand where I was coming from. It's ridiculous. After more than 10 years and being remarried, my mum refused to agree to any new terms for their divorce, so every time something in life changes, they have to go to court. For example, he got fired from a job and wanted to settle on the debt from over the unemployment period. He wants to update the child support as the youngest is no longer in high school, etc. And she blames him for taking her to court even though she is the one that refuses to be civil and agree to anything. So long story short, the wedding was in the spring and did not have any family from my side attend. We had us, the officiant, and 2 witnesses. Since then, we have moved to be closer to all of our family, and my husband's side threw us a little celebration, kinda like a reception party. It was beautiful, and I'm so happy that they thought of us and did that for us. Only my husband's direct family knew about it and attended though. And FYI, I did not wear my gown to this party either. My mum has been saying that since we moved, she wanted to do something like that for us too. She wanted to plan it for in like 5 days after she told me and got all upset when I told her that I couldn't do it because that weekend I was already busy. I had tickets to a non-refundable show. She then got upset because it's hard to line up the family, but wouldn't you talk to the guest of honor to make sure they are free first? Then she calls me saying that she really wants my husband and I to wear our wedding attire. This way, we can pretend that we were there too. But I can't give her the satisfaction of ruining my wedding day and getting pictures with me for it. I will go to the party, let them celebrate, but I will not be wearing my dress. I told her that I would think about it, but honestly, I am baffled at how she thinks this is okay. She ruined my day and now wants to feel good by having pictures together. I will not give her that satisfaction. And I don't care if our future kids ask why no family is in our wedding photos, and I plan to be honest with them. I'll be telling them that they were not invited due to the drama they were causing, even though we told everyone that the wedding had been cancelled. Obviously, it would be so disappointing for the OP not to be able to have her mother and her family at her wedding, but the ultimatum the OP was given by her mother is not okay. You're making your own daughter choose between having her mother and her father at the wedding. I don't care what kind of problems or issues you have between yourself and your ex-husband, but this kind of behavior is not okay. I think at the end of the day, the OP did the right thing by just having a small wedding without them, and there is absolutely no way I would do anything to give the mother gratification for what she's done, because what she did was quite frankly not good enough, and she should feel ashamed of herself. This was a few years ago when my mum was in her late 30s. The babysitter, who we'll call May, was 15 to 16 years old, my sister Eva was 11. I was 19 and the names have been changed for privacy purposes. My mum is a single parent and has been for over a decade now. She lives in her late father's house, which she does not own, but no one in our family wanted her and my sister to be homeless. All of her bills, water, gas, electricity, and sometimes groceries when she forgets to renew SNAP benefits were paid for by her grandma. My mum had a job at a local gas station. Her shift started at 3 AM and she wanted my sister's babysitter to show up at 2 to 2:30 AM. My mum had problems paying the babysitter on time, and one week just didn't pay her at all. May told my mum that if she didn't pay her this time, she wasn't going to come back next week. My mum basically told her that she was going to come back whether she was paid or not because Eva and my mum needed her. So, my mum didn't pay her and May didn't show up the next Saturday. My mum refused to go into work for the whole weekend and started calling May to tell her that May owed her money for making her miss work. She said that she owed May $40, but by missing work on Saturday, she missed out on making $80 on her check. She wanted May to pay her $80, but since she owed May money, my mum wanted to be nice by only asking for $40 and not making her pay for Sunday too. May refused to come back and babysit ever again and told other teen babysitters to avoid working for my mum. Around this time, I came back from my first year in college and was looking for a place to live until I found an apartment. My mum offered to let me live with her until I found a place on the condition that I was always available to watch my sister when she needed me. So I agreed and moved in. I also worked and paid for groceries while saving money for when I moved out. She had been moved to the late afternoon shift because she wasn't showing up for the morning shift. Her shift started at 2 PM and I clocked out of my job at noon. We didn't have a car, so we walked everywhere. Her walk to work was 15 minutes and mine was about 10 minutes. One day we had a meeting at work and it ran late. I clocked out at 2:10 and as I walked outside, I pulled out my phone to call my mum and tell her that I just left work and would be home soon. But I found a voicemail from my mum that she'd left at like 12:02, telling me that I was irresponsible and inconsiderate, and if I couldn't call her when I was on my way home, then I could live somewhere else. By the time the voicemail ended, I was walking up the driveway and my mum and sister were outside watering plants. I told her why I was late and she told me not to listen to the voicemail she had left and delete it. A month or two later, I found a place to rent with 2 roommates. I told my mum I was moving 2 weeks before we were set to move in so that she could work on finding a babysitter. She told me that she would work on it, but if she didn't find one, she expected me to still come back to her house and watch my sister every day. She also still wanted me to pay for groceries after I moved out. After about 2 weeks, she still hadn't found a babysitter, so I continued to watch my sister after I moved out for about a week and a half. I was working from 3 AM to noon, then going to my mum's house and taking care of my sister in the house until my mum came home around midnight, even though her shift ended at 9 o'clock. Then I would go to my place, get maybe 2 hours of sleep and have to be up for work again. I told my mum that I wasn't going to do it anymore and reminded her that she started leaving me and our brother alone when we were 5 and 6 and that Eva didn't really need a babysitter at 11. She had a breakdown and told me that it was my fault if she lost her job and Eva got taken away from her. She stopped going to work and got fired, and it has been 4 years and only recently started working again about 3 months ago. It's one thing to treat your adult daughter like this and try and put the blame of your bad parenting back on her, but it's another thing entirely to let an 11-year-old child suffer because you're too selfish to admit that you're in the wrong and end up not working and likely not being able to support her for 4 years. Honestly, it's no surprise she couldn't keep a babysitter because with that attitude, I don't know a single person who would want to work for someone like this. The title is a bit dramatic, but oh well. I just got inspired to write about my crazy mother-in-law and father-in-law, and I hope this can be used as a cautionary tale in this crazy time. This was back in 2010, and we had to live with my husband's family for a while. It was my sister-in-law's house, but we lived with her, her daughter, my mother-in-law, father-in-law, and brother-in-law. When my son was 5 months old, my niece got violently ill one night and kept throwing up. Obviously, I decided to keep the baby away from the family so he wouldn't get sick. They did not like that, especially my mother-in-law and father-in-law, who kept whining and complaining that I was keeping their precious grandson away. Even after explaining that I didn't want my niece to get him sick, I gave in because I was tired of hearing them complain literally all day on the condition that the niece stays in her room the whole time and they wash first. I am aware that this is where I messed up. I had to use the bathroom and was only gone for a few minutes. When I came back, my niece was on the couch holding my son, snot dripping from her nose, throat scratchy, with my father-in-law telling her, "Give your cousin a big kiss," which she does, right on the lips. I freaked out and snatched my baby and locked us in the bathroom so I could wash him. The whole time, my mother-in-law and father-in-law were at the door telling me that I'm overreacting and that sharing germs builds immunity and other BS. Of course, the next morning he has a high fever and he's really lethargic. I tell the in-laws that I want to take him to the hospital, but my sister-in-law was adamant that it wasn't that bad and that I should make an appointment with his pediatrician instead. I didn't have a license or a car, so I had to rely on other people. Like an idiot, I listened to her because I thought she was on my side and knew more because her child is older. I made an appointment for that afternoon and I get there and the doctor took one look at him and told me to take him to the hospital, which was 1 block down, and said that they would be expecting me. He was admitted as soon as we walked in the door. They told me I was lucky and that if I'd waited any longer, my baby wouldn't have lasted until the next day. His lungs were filling up with mucus and he couldn't breathe. He had to be hooked to an oxygen tank and they had to vacuum suction the mucus out every hour. We spent a week in the hospital and he made a full recovery. Of course, the in-laws fully blamed me, my mother-in-law especially, but the others more or less agreed with her. She said that my son got sick because I was dirty for having a child out of wedlock and that I was a bad mother. My husband was peed off and told her off, but that woman has the worst case of selective hearing I've ever seen. I've never fully trusted her again. I've had to slightly censor the title because of the way YouTube is, but you get the idea of what it says, and I'll tell you what, I don't think it's an exaggeration by any means. I mean, the OP made very strict conditions about them being able to see her daughter, and the entitled parents went out of their way to ignore this because they thought they knew better. They waited for the perfect opportunity when the OP wasn't around to break these rules and put her child in serious danger. This is one of, if not the worst entitled parent story I've ever heard, and if this is what your parents-in-law are like, honestly, I would be cutting all contact with them because they cannot be trusted around you or your children. And that is that for today's episode of Entitled Parents. If you did enjoy, don't forget to hit the like button down below, and if you're new, don't forget to subscribe. There are 2 hand-selected videos on your screen right now which I suggest you watch if you want to see a bit more Bumfris. Make sure to hit that subscribe link as well. I hope you all have a fantastic day, and I'll see you tomorrow for some Choosing Beggars. Bye.